I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creepin' and crawlin'. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever, whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together Rebecca and I are struggling to bring you another hour of wonderful radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your family, and the wild turkeys that are out there in the woods, and the coyotes and the Canada geese, and basically everybody and everything, because, like it or not, all of us are together on this wonderful planet called Earth. And we have a great show lined up for you today. We're going to just chat for a few minutes here, and then we're going to talk about, we have an interview with a fella named Brian McPeek, who's down there in Richland County, where they are fighting against the laws where they outlawed wind and solar power in Richland County. A lot of citizens actually got together and said, this is crazy, we need wind and solar. So they're in the middle of a campaign to bring it back. Then we'll hear from our advertisers and patrons. And after that, it'll be Rebecca's turn at the mic. Rebecca, what do you have to talk to us about today?
Lion's mane mushrooms.
Ah, tasty subject.
Yep.
Okay, and after that, it's ecological news from around the world. And I tried to stay kind of upbeat this week, so we got a lot of pretty good ecological news going. And then hopefully at some point we'll hear from you at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. And you can also text at any time at 419-973-5841. That's 419-973-5841 on any environmental topic that tickles your fancy, that you might have questions about. Rebecca and I will do our best to answer them. So this day, of course, February 8th, 2026, is Super Bowl Sunday. And people who've been listening to the show for all these years, this is like our 7th year of the show? It's kind of amazing.
Staggeringly long time.
But what we do every year on Super Bowl Sunday is we have the Eco Bowl. And that is, we rate the two Super Bowl cities in terms of sustainability in order to pick an Eco Bowl winner. And of course, this year, the two cities, as you know, since this is our show airs initially live on a sports station, 100.7 FM, The Ticket. This year we got Boston versus Seattle.
Right.
And this was kind of a tough one because both of these cities are actually quite ecologically minded. They're quite focused on sustainability. And so it was nice to have to compare two really good cities. Both of them make almost everybody's top 10 sustainable cities lists in the U.S. and but they kind of switch places depending on who's doing the looking. And so, I looked at it from a whole bunch of different angles. One is mass transit, of course, and both of them have excellent mass transit.
So jealous.
Yes. Boston, the population of the city of Boston is about 675,000 people or so, and the population of Seattle is 737,000. So Seattle's a little bit bigger as a city, but they're comparable in size. So on the mass transit front, about 48,700,000 rides a year are taken on the metro, the MBTA, the Metro Boston Transit Authority, and versus around King County, which is the transit authority for Seattle, about 88,600,000. So more rides on the Seattle mass transit than on the Boston, which kind of surprised me. But part of the reason is that the Seattle mass transit is organized county-wide, whereas the Boston is focused on more on the city. So they're both great on mass transit. They both have the mandatory recycling. They really strong citywide recycling programs. Now, so power, looking at it, where they get their electricity, that's kind of an interesting thing. Seattle is better in terms of CO2. In fact, 88% of Seattle's electricity comes from quote-unquote non-carbon, or from hydropower. So almost all Seattle's electricity comes from hydro, so they don't put a lot of CO2 in the air. Add to that 11% that comes from wind, and then unfortunately they get about 60% of their power from nuclear. But if you add up all those non-CO2 sources, they're about 94% of Seattle's electricity comes from non or low carbon sources. And in fact, they get zero power from coal or natural gas. So they're kind of ahead on that one. Contrast that with Boston, 63% of their electricity comes from natural gas. 20% comes from nuclear, which is 9% coal, which is bad, and they only get 4% of their power from solar. And even though they're on the coast and they have excellent wind resources, they don't get any significant amount of their electricity from wind power. Now, Boston is more efficient. They have more households using less electricity than Seattle, and that's partly because Boston is so concentrated, whereas Seattle's kind of spread out over a wider region. So it's really close. On air pollution, they're very close on air pollution. The particulate matter, parts per billion particulate matter in Boston is 8.2 on average, and in Seattle it's 8.3. So they're really close on that. Ozone days, Boston comes out a little bit ahead. They've got 4.5 high ozone days a year, whereas Seattle has 5.2 high ozone days per year, which also surprised me because I figured being on the coast there, Seattle would get fewer ozone days. But what really tipped the scales this time, what really just sort of made me pick the one over the other, is Boston Harbor. Because Boston Harbor there's been a decades-long effort to clean up Boston Harbor, and it's affected everything from sewage to industrial pollution. They've brought oyster beds have returned. The whole region has focused on improving the water quality in Boston Harbor, and it's really paid off. And that was partly how Boston was able to fight off Holtec's attempt to dump 1 million gallons of radioactive water from the Pilgrim nuclear plant, the shut down Pilgrim nuclear plant, into Boston Harbor, because they have this infrastructure of citizens groups and government agencies, and everybody is focused on cleaning up Boston Harbor. whereas Puget Sound, unfortunately, is getting pretty polluted.
Oh,
Yeah,
Josh, dang it.
yes, and one of the big sources of that
And
pollution.
it's bad news for Seattle sports fans.
Yes. One of the big reasons for all that pollution is actually cruise ships,
Oh,
because it's such a beautiful coastline. Everybody's going up there with cruise ships, and the cruise ships like flush out their filters and stuff while they're at harbor, and Puget Sound is suffering because of that.
Oh, dear.
So this year's Eco Bowl winner has to go to Boston.
And it's Boston by a nose.
Yes. So good luck.
We should really have like the sports guys read that, like it was a sports commentator of a game.
Yeah, maybe we'll.
That'd be cool.
Yeah,
We'll
all right,
recruit
we'll
them
try
this
that.
time. We don't know how to do that.
All right, we'll do that next time.
Okay.
We'll pre-record it, and you
All
and I
right.
could do. You could do color, of course. Yeah.
I can't do that.
All right. So that's it. What do you think? Do you agree? 877-909-1007, or you can text 419-973-5841. Do you agree that Boston should win the Eco Bowl, or are you somebody who really likes Seattle and you'd want to come out, defend them? So
Both extremely cool cities, by the by.
yes, it was a really good competition. It's nice to be able to choose from the best, instead of having, a city that's really
Which is
nasty.
less worse.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So now it's time to go on to the next portion of our show. And what we're going to be talking with Brian McPeek, because as we've said before, they've got a bit of a controversy going down there. About 40 of Ohio's 88 counties have banned wind and solar power, thanks to our Republican conservative legislature that wants to take us back to the 1950s in all things. And so,
Except for the part where...
we have a caller. Okay, caller, go ahead.
Hello, caller.
Hi. Yeah. So I wanted to weigh in on your
On the Eco Bowl.
I think that next year you should add the city that's hosting as a wild card or something, because they have. I was watching some of the pregame, or not preparatory stuff. Man, there's a big carbon footprint in getting ready for that thing. And the NFL a few years ago used to tout how they're it's like carbon neutral or whatever event or something like that. And I don't think they even try anymore. But I mean, they brought in. I mean, they brought in new sod and all this. That's just thinking, So
Yeah.
the hosting city might be a offender.
That's a great idea. All right, next year we'll have a wild card. We'll toss them in
Definitely.
to the mix. And you did remind me about something about Seattle, is that because they have so much hydropower, they were actually the very first carbon neutral utility.
Wahoo.
The utility company there's called City Light, and because they've got so much wind and hydro, they are already a carbon neutral municipal utility. So that's cool. But all right, well, thank you for your suggestion.
But it's you got to be careful a little bit, because it might be carbon neutral, but in terms of ecological impact, maybe for water. But anyway, I'll talk
Hydropower is
to you later.
not completely. Yeah, it's not benign. It has problems too. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. Thanks for the call.
Bye.
Okay. So, anyone else want to weigh in? 877-909-1007. All right. So let's head over to our interview with Brian McPeek. Hello, and welcome back to For Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and who you're with?
Yeah, my name's Brian McPeek, and I am with the IBEW Local 688, Mansfield, Ohio.
All right. Thanks, Brian. And the last time we had you on was back in the fall, because you folks were just finishing up a petition drive to put a question on the ballot there in Richland County. Basically, Richland is one of the many counties in the state that have banned wind and solar development for a good chunk of the county. And you guys actually have put in a referendum to overturn that, correct?
Absolutely. Yep, that was a tall order, but we were able to accomplish it. So we were pretty proud of that in the
Yeah,
30-day window we had.
that's great. And the push for this, the impetus from this was like completely organic, right? As I recall, it was just
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
want to.
we got I got some phone calls about, because I was a very vocal opposition. I talked to my township trustees who did not do a ban, and I went and talked to the township association and talked to several others, and then there were some citizens that just reached out. It's like, hey, what do you think? Can we can try. It's a tall task to do in 30 days. I mean, I think it was, I'm going from memory here, but I want to say 3,600, somewhere in the 3,600 signature realm off the top of my head. That's not the exact number, but a lot in 30 days, without, a lot of no big money behind us to pay people to go around and collect signatures, just a citizen led group. It was
Just
all
all
task.
volunteer, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's it certainly is refreshing. And so the actual election is in May, right?
Yes, May 5th.
Okay, so you are in the heart of the campaigning time. How is that going?
It's going pretty good. We've got some town halls and fundraisers planned. Um, and we've been meeting weekly, trying to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And so I think it's going good. We got a solid plan ahead of us, and we've been doing phone calls, and hopefully when the weather turns, we can do door knocking, and
Mhm.
we're pretty excited to move forward. We're pretty impressed we were able to accomplish it. So
Yeah. So has there been a lot of pushback? Have the anti-wind and solar forces what have they been doing?
I mean, as of now, no, there hasn't really been any kickback other than the um, commissioners have been have stated several times they don't think that we should be doing it. They think that what they did was what was best, and we think that there's at least 3,600 people who disagree with them. So we want the county to weigh in and say how they feel on it.
Right. And Richland County, 3,600 is a pretty significant chunk, right? That's
Yeah.
yeah, you're a pretty rural county. Where is Richland exactly?
So so I'm in Mansfield. It's about exactly 1 hour north of Columbus and 1 hour south of Cleveland.
Okay.
So then, Richland is kind of, Mansfield's not quite center. It's a little south in Richland, but pretty close to center, of the county. So pretty much right between Cleveland and Columbus.
I wanted to ask your reaction to some news that came out this past week that 2025 wind and solar, that is renewables in Europe, actually passed fossil fuels. And so, renewables are now the main source of electricity in Europe. And so I kind of wanted to get your opinion, sort of contrast that against what we're seeing in Ohio and in places like Richland.
Yes. I mean, the fossil fuel industry, this is just my opinion, has done a very good job campaigning against renewables. As IBEW, we're pro energy,
Mhm.
of all types. However, build time, as far as from start of construction to online, renewables are the fastest. You cannot build a nuclear power plant or a coal-fired power plant or a powered gas-fired power plant, and then in the time that you can not only build it but have it online and connected to the grid and rolling.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and the needs in Ohio in particular, just from all the growth we've had, and even to get more, central Ohio, the just the amount of growth in power and water needs for that matter, but power in particular is massive. And our big thing my big thing is, for me, I don't want my bill to skyrocket because of demand versus supply. And I want to put my guys to work so that they can, build these projects and they can make money while saving the community's money.
So you mentioned growth. What sort of growth are you getting? Are you getting data centers over there in Richland County?
Yeah, it's just not necessarily in Richland County, but Central Ohio in general. And my local, covers about an hour circle around it. Well, not quite, but that's what I say, an hour circle. It goes down Marion and Knox County are kind of my southern tips down there.
Mhm.
In Central Ohio, I say from, we're probably the northern tip of Central Ohio, and then about the same amount south of Columbus. That's what I would call Central Ohio, and there is a massive amount of data centers being built. Data centers in particular. The chip plant is going down there, also Central Ohio, and there's just a lot of things, but in particular, data centers, as you mentioned, are taking a lot of the power.
I see. Now you have personally worked on solar projects, right? You've helped put them in.
And I've worked on small, but not large. Now my local has, I've,
Mhm.
um, represented the guys building them. Now I've worked on the permitting phases of some of these jobs,
Mhm.
but I don't think other than, I put in a very small, like the school signs, they had some solar on them that I put in years ago, but no, I haven't worked on any
Mhm.
large solar fields.
Right, but you've got enough exposure to be able to comment on, one of the common things that people who are anti-solar say is that the solar panels are filled with all kinds of heavy metals that will leach into the soil. And, since you're the folks that are actually handling these things, uh, is that your experience? What do you see, or what do you experience?
So these panels, now, this is just to my knowledge, and I've, asked around, from the installer to the supplier to the builder, and the only answer I can get of anything hazardous in them is the soldering of the joints.
Mm.
The solder has minimal amounts of lead in it. And that's all of it. There's more of that in your car than there is in, you know, probably a car would be equivalent to a large solar field.
Hmm.
So,
Right.
even if it all leaked, there are very little hazardous materials,
Mhm.
if any. And like I said, I don't know that I would classify that as hazardous because I don't know how, even if you bust a panel open and it sits out in the weather for years, I don't know how that washes down into your soil and contaminates your water.
Right. How would people be able to follow what you folks are doing? What's a way that they can keep track of this?
So we have a website now and a Facebook. This is our coalition that we've kind of created. So our Facebook is No Ban on Property Rights in Richland County. You can follow that. And then give me a second. Our website is nobanonpropertyrights.com.
No ban on propertyrights.com. And that is an important aspect of this, isn't it? The whole property rights question.
Well,
Because,
absolutely.
yeah,
For me in particular, it's the growth, it's the opportunity that, power generation brings. But at the same time, we are a rural township or township. I live in a township, but we're a rural county for the most part.
Mhm.
And, I have, the commissioners have been quoted several times as saying, we're going to keep farmland. So you're going to tell the farmer what he can and can't do with his land. Shouldn't he make that decision? That's our, you know, coming from a rural area, I've always been anti anybody telling me within reason, what I can and cannot do, and we're not saying that this is going to be open season, anybody can put a solar field, but, the common sense thing to do is a project wants to come to town. Okay, let's look at it. Let's weigh the pros and the cons, and then we'll make our educated decision instead of just saying, nah, we don't even want to look at it. Let's, do our due diligence and
Right. Because even if you're, even if you overturn the ban, every development would still have to go through the environmental review and the power siting board hearings. And
Absolutely. So it goes through the townships and the county commissioners. I mean, they have to, basically say, yeah, this isn't going to be detrimental or whatever. They get a large amount of say. Plus, that goes to the Ohio Power Siting Board, and then they go through it and they say, okay, we're going to check your, data and make sure that it's correct. Okay, yes, no, whatever. And then we're going to look and say, okay, is this going to have runoff issues? Is there going to be, archaeological issues with the, area you pick? Is it, historically something under there? Is there, they look at everything. I mean, they go through it with a fine tooth comb. I can't believe how detailed they get.
Mhm.
And it's not open season is the big thing. It still gets judged very well. And
if there were environmental costs that would come out in those sorts of hearings and
absolutely.
those environmental impact statements. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right.
Absolutely. Yes, correct.
All right. Well, great. Well, good luck. Keep plugging away. Is there anything you'd like to add before we end?
I don't think so. I appreciate the, opportunity to talk to you, and thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, hopefully we'll be able to talk again after you guys win.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
That's my big thing. I like to win, so I don't like to lose. So I'm sure I'll see you here shortly.
Excellent. All right. That was our interview with Brian McPeek. What did you think? 877-909-1007. What do you think about the idea of solar farm moving in nearby? He is a member of IBEW, that's the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So he knows what he's talking about when it comes in terms of the electrical generation part of solar energy. Okay, now it's time to hear from our wonderful patrons and sponsors.
Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place? It's right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before by maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future.
Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or call 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And, of course, our show is also brought to you by our wonderful, wonderful patrons, people who've gone to patreon.com, that's Patreon, and they searched for For a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page. They put a membership level. They chose a membership level that matched their budget. And so every month a little bit comes out of their account, comes over to us. And that's how we can keep the show on the air. So thank you to our patrons. Okay, Rebecca, your turn at the mic. What do we got this week?
All righty. Well, I want to talk about lion's mane, which a friend of ours who knows a lot about herbalism has been talking up lately.
Lion's mane mushrooms.
Mushrooms, yeah, not actual lion's mane.
Okay.
I should point out
right.
that don't use those for any. Don't leave them to the lion. Don't touch.
Yeah, just the harvesting of actual lion's
Yeah.
manes is kind of tricky. So
Don't do it. Yeah. So their Latin name is Hericium erinaceus, which actually translates to hedgehog in Latin.
Really?
Yeah, the most, I guess, the ancient Romans thought they looked like, somebody thought they looked like a hedgehog. That's one of their nicknames is the hedgehog mushroom, too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They look a little bit like a tribble from Star Trek. Yeah, but, they are a large, shaggy, white, edible, and medicinal mushroom. which you will see growing on hardwood trees in the forest if you live in a temperate region. They're all over temperate regions, apparently. They have a very unique and distinctive look, like sort of cousin It's offspring or something. They're weird looking, not like a mushroom, not like a normal mushroom. They're said to have a taste like seafood, but kind of like lobster or crab or something. They have sort of a chewy texture, and they absorb other flavors very easily, which I do not like mushrooms or fish, and I am drinking the lion's mane tea. And I can, and it has little chunky bits in it, and I do not have a problem with them. So even if you don't like mushrooms mushrooms or fish are the two categories of food I like the least. And I'm cool with these mushrooms. They don't taste like much to me. So yeah, according to hostdefense.com, they can grow up to 30 meters in diameter. No, not 30 meters. 30 inches in diameter.
30 inches, okay.
That would be a really large mushroom.
Yeah.
That would be like Attack from Outer Space mushroom. It'd be terrifying.
Well, they are that big under the ground.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, it's
That's
true.
true.
Hey, technically I'm not wrong. But yeah, I'm not sure. It's hard to find information about lion's mane mushrooms online because they go right into all the health benefits. I get the impression that some scientific studies have suggested that these may be correct, but not all of them are completely verified. That would be that'd be several shows, I think. But yeah, they show promise for use for brain health by regenerating nerves. They promote nerve growth, apparently.
Wow.
Anxiety, inflammation, and they're an antioxidant. And there was something else. Oh, immune support, possibly digestive and immune support. So since they grow on hardwood trees, I wanted to find out the official definition of that. Hardwood trees are, I think, basically all deciduous. They lose their leaves every year, and they have leaves instead of needles, basically broad leaves. So a hardwood tree has heavy and strong wood because a high wood density, meaning their wood is heavy and strong, and that's because the fibers are closely packed in the wood. And they test high on the Janka hardness scale, which I had never heard of before, meaning that they have a lot of durability and strength. So if you want to build something that can last, hardwoods, or if you want to grow lion's mane, same deal.
Was that Jenga hardness or
Janka?
Oh, Ka? Okay.
Janka.
I see. All right.
It sounds like there's a G in there somewhere, but there isn't. Yeah, so environmentally speaking, a lot of their benefits are associated with the fact that they are saprophytes, meaning they are an organism, usually a fungi or a bacteria, fungus in this case, which obtains nutrients by breaking down dead organic matter, either plant or animal, which you want because it disperses the nutrients. And nutrients are better if you kind of spread them around. This is partly from hostdefense.com again, but okay. Imagine that instead of you getting 3 meals a day for the entire month, on the first of the month, someone just dumped a cow on your head. That's too many nutrients in the wrong place. You want the nutrients spread out, and you do not want bacteria doing the job all by themselves or breaking them down, because then this is how India had a rabies epidemic, apparently, because they killed off a bunch of vultures. They decided they didn't like the vultures or condors or whatever they have over there. They have some kind of vulture, and they killed off a bunch of them for government policy. And then there were too many rabid dogs, because vultures actually have stomach acid, which can kill rabies.
Oh,
Vultures are the vultures have superpowers, but because the rabid dogs are not getting eaten, there was a rabies epidemic. So, yeah, saprophytic mushrooms, same deal. They help break things down, make them harmless, not attract bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend in Pakistan who a couple weeks ago had a rabid dog in his village, and it bit his uncle.
Oh.
So that was very, very bad. You don't want
bad,
that. So yeah, that's important. And apparently, they sometimes are touted as a possible sustainable meat substitute. They do only have 2.5 grams of protein per 100 grams serving. A bit higher when dried, but they're very high in fiber and nutrients. They got a lot of vitamins. Basically, they're real good for you. So there's that. Major environmental drawback would be that over harvesting in the wild can cause ecological strain and habitat destruction. And you can cultivate them in, I don't know, indoors, greenhouses, but it's very energy intensive for medicinal purposes. It sucks up a lot of energy because they're very finicky. You got to have like the temperature, the moisture, the airflow, humidity, all has to be perfect to make a usable lion's mane. So that's a little bit of a problem. Apparently, let me see, according to the Mushroom Show, episode 31 on YouTube, it's now illegal to pick and it's illegal to pick them in the UK because they're concerned that cultivations. Oh, well, mostly because of that, because they're picking too many and it's bad. Also, there's a concern that cultivated strains will escape, and people are worried about this because it's felt that possibly there are more beneficial compounds in the wild ones, maybe. But I don't think that's really been verified. And they don't want like the heritage strains being destroyed by domestic strains. Apparently, they're also similar to something called bear's tooth that grows in Canada, except nobody's really sure whether bear's tooth has the same properties or not. Threats to them would include logging and urbanization causing habitat destruction. Also, they suffer from pollution and climate change. So that is lion's mane. They are cool, but you got to be careful how you cultivate them.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Thanks. Yeah, I've had them, and they are delicious. I like them.
Ooh, I forgot. The way that they disperse the nutrients is through their mycelial network, which is basically just the mushroom equivalent of roots.
Right. Except, of course, fungi could, instead of just taking all the nutrients in, actually put some of those nutrients out. They have this like negotiation thing going on with the tree roots.
Yeah,
They're like, we'll give you some of this and we'll take some of that.
Part of how they disperse it.
Yeah, it's cool. All right. Thanks, Rebecca.
Welcome.
Okay, on to ecological news. And our first story, we actually referred to it in our interview there with Brian McPeek. A story in The Guardian on January 2nd. Wind and solar overtook fossil fuels for the EU power generation in 2025, report finds. And so what has happened in the European Union is they've been building so much wind and solar that they actually have now, that is now the main source of electricity in the European Union. 30% of their electricity comes from wind and solar, or came in 2025, and only 29% was coal, oil, and gas added together. Nuclear was a distant third. And so, congratulations, European Union. I mean, this kind of story is one of the ones that makes me think maybe we can do this. There's been a huge acceleration, especially in solar. It went up 20% in 1 year. And solar now, of that 30%, 13% was solar, 17% was wind. Wind actually went down 1%, 24 to 25, partly because there was a little less wind, and partly because they have problems with distribution. They're actually generating more power than their grid can effectively distribute right now, although they're working to fix that as fast as they can. Another reason is that the batteries have been going like gangbusters. So when the wind and the solar are producing more than is needed, they're charging up the batteries. In fact, in Italy right now, batteries supply 20% of the evening demand. So that's when, just after the sun goes down and it's still hot, the air conditioners are still running. That's when there's a sort of another peak in demand, and more of the European countries are meeting that with their battery backup. Coal reached a record low in 2025. Coal only provided 9% of the EU's electricity. And one of the comments from somebody in Europe about this was that part of what's driving this whole thing is the destabilized geopolitical situation. In other words, the combination of Russia cutting off gas supplies, and then the EU went really dependent on the U.S. for natural gas exports, but then the U.S. got all insane and started threatening Europe, and so all the European countries are responding to this by increasing their locally generated wind and solar power, and so they crossed a huge milestone in 2025. So let's hope they keep going and eventually get to that 100% mark. Okay, next story. Speaking of which, here's a little more evidence that this is not just practical, but it's happening. Renew Economy, January 28th. Extraordinary wind and solar to the rescue as states smash demand records in unprecedented heat wave. And we touched on this story last week. Down in South Australia, they had record demand on January 26th. It was a 4.2 gigawatt demand, and that was actually 10% higher than the previous record, which was just 2 weeks earlier on January 8th. That was 3.8 gigawatts. So it is so hot down there. It's approaching 120 degrees, or it has been for this past month. It's just a record hot summer down there. And so wind and solar generation is up to 3.95 gigawatts. That broke a record on that hot. The day was a record demand, record heat, and record wind and solar generation. So in other words, the wind and solar are keeping pace with the increased demand because of global warming. Solar alone met 45% of demand during that record hot day. Wind and solar reduced demand by 30%. And that's what that is. That's the wind and solar behind the meter. So that's like a rooftop solar. First will meet the demands of your house, so you get your electricity first. And then that reduces the amount you have to take off the grid. And so wind and solar reduced demand by 30% during that heat wave. South Australia is now the largest grid with the highest penetration of wind and solar. 75% of South Australia's electricity comes just from wind and solar. Demand has gone down 58%, and South Australia is aiming to be 100% wind and solar by the end of 2027. So showing it's not just possible, it's practical. And their electricity is cheaper there than it is in the provinces next door that have coal power. So another bit of good news. Okay, now here's some interesting news. ScienceDaily.com, February 2nd. Hundreds of new species found in hidden world beneath the surface. And we've talked about this before. A lot of companies are trying to mine the seabed, and it would be, absolute disaster. So they did a 5-year study that had 160 days at sea, and this study was done by the International Seabed Authority, which is the organization that's supposed to make sure that if there's any mining or damage to the seabed, it doesn't sterilize the oceans. So they needed a baseline, and they found they discovered 800 species, hundreds of which are brand new species that have never been seen before, which means we have no idea like what they're doing in the ecosystem or how essential they are. They studied what's a place called the Clarion Clipper Zone, which is the Pacific Ocean between Mexico and Hawaii, and they were looking at organisms that were living 12,000 feet deep, no sunlight there, not very much food. Sediment increases only 1,000th of a millimeter per year, so it takes 1,000 years to get a millimeter of additional seabed down there. They looked at an area that had been mined, and they found a 37% drop in animal numbers and a 32% drop in diversity, which might make you think, oh, that's not that bad. In fact, that was one of the editorial comments in this article. It's that the damage might not be as bad as people think it might be, except that,
Or it might.
yeah, A, it might, because we really don't know. But B, the amount of animal life down there is 1/100th the amount that you find, higher up on the ocean floor in more shallow oceans. And so if you take out 37% of the population, but that population's only 100th as big as it is in other parts of the ocean, you're actually taking out a huge chunk of the ecosystem, and they might not survive. Mostly what they found down there were bristle worms, crustaceans, mussels, and snails. And one of the researchers pointed out that essentially the situation is we have no idea what it will actually do if they do start mining in a big way. So let's pray that they don't. Okay, next story. Canary Media, February 5th of this year, are faked public comments about to tank an Ohio solar farm. And they're talking about the Crossroads Solar Project. It's in Morrow County, Ohio. And the Ohio Power Siting Board is currently considering an application to put in a big solar farm. And they're going to rule on this by March 19th. The thing is that people went and looked at the public comments, and they discovered that there were a whole bunch of false names, people who didn't actually exist, a whole bunch of anonymous comments, like no even attempt to pretend to be a real person. A lot of them were not residents of Morrow County, and everyone that turned out to be there is no such person, or their email bounced, or they're not at the address they claimed to be at. All those comments were negative. So it wasn't like
Of course they were.
it wasn't like half the fake comments were positive and half were negative. All the fake comments were liars, were negative, trying to say don't put in the solar. If you subtracted out the fake comments, then it turns out that 78% of the comments were in favor. So that matches national surveys about solar and wind. That's about average for the country. Most people, even conservatives, even Republicans, most people want us to go further into solar energy because they understand it's clean, it's cheap, and so forth. And then so not only did 78% support it, but 58% of the people who actually live in Morrow County supported it. Even though the people who are opposing it are claiming that the citizens of Morrow County oppose the solar project 10-1, they haven't got any data to back that up. The only data we have are these comments where 78% of the people want. So the problem is that it's looking increasingly like the Ohio Power Siting Board is going to use the fake comments, take them into consideration, give them equal weight to the real comments. And so they may forbid this solar project on the basis of fake public comments. Okay, we're moving right along here.
You know what?
What?
Okay, I was thinking while you were talking about the Super Bowl, the two cities.
Oh, yes.
And I realized this is actually the Fraser Crane Super Bowl.
You're right.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah.
Both places were Fraser Crane, the character, lived.
Right. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, embarrassingly, I was obsessed with that show in the late 90s to the point where I actually bought Kelsey Grammer's autobiography.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I'm going to do a little review here. Big mistake, huge snooze. He's the most boring guy who ever lived. And yeah.
According to him, right? That's his autobiography.
True.
So I'm suspecting he may have left a few things out of there.
But he does like to surf, so that relates to the environment a little bit.
Oh, surfing. Oh, yeah.
The real life guy, Kelsey Grammer, not the.
Right. Surfers are big environmentalists
There
as
you
a
go.
group. Yeah, because they've got to be in that ocean. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next story. This is actually information I got during a Zoom meeting that was held this past week. President Trump had Executive Order 14300, and in that executive order, he called 70 years of scientific studies that prove all radiation is harmful, no matter how small the dose, called the linear no threshold model. He, in his executive order, just declared that result of 70 years of scientific studies was unscientific.
All right.
So he just, said, oh, that's not scientific because I say it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this executive order eliminates the linear no threshold model, and it forces the executive orders telling the NRC to get rid of the linear no threshold model and to increase the exposure that's allowed for nuclear plant workers. So even those of you who support nukes, and even those of you listening who might actually work, let's say at Davis-Besse, what's happening is that Trump and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission are getting ready to roughly quadruple the amount of radiation you are allowed to be exposed to. Again, not based on any scientific studies, because all the scientific studies still support, no exposure. We reported a couple weeks ago about how ALARA, the as low as reasonably achievable level for radiation exposure, how the Department of Energy got rid of the ALARA rule. NRC at this point still has it. So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, part of this executive order, he is telling the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to get rid of ALARA. The only problem is that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is supposed to be an independent agency. And so the president is not supposed to be able to control the NRC with executive orders. But that, of course, isn't stopping him from trying. And NRC was much more independent, but it's been facing huge layoffs and firings. And essentially, he's following the pattern he's trying to use with all the regulatory agencies. He's basically trying to lobotomize the NRC. And part of what this also does is it more than doubles the amount of radiation exposure to the general public. So you and I, even if we don't work at a nuke plant, if this executive order goes through, we will get exposed to more radiation just as a routine matter. So the expected rule, NRC's expected new rule is going to come out in April. There'll be a 30-day comment period, so let's keep an eye on that one. Okay, final story. Going back to Renew Economy on January 28th. And this is interesting because Renew Economy is an Australian-based paper. It's an Australian-based magazine looking at renewable energy, but they're reporting on the U.S. performance during the last winter storm. The title is Fossil Fuels Fail During Massive Winter Storm in U.S. as 21 Gigawatts Goes Missing in Big Freeze. So you might have heard a little bit about the fact that places like Tennessee lost electricity during that last storm. In fact, big chunks of Mississippi are still without power more than 2 weeks later. What they were able to tease out is this actually was reported on by Silvio Marcacci in the Powerline Substack, but it turns out that natural gas supply and the cold caused a whole bunch of power to just drop out of the grid. And in fact, it was so much power that the entire grid might have collapsed, except that they also had downed power lines and blackouts. And so demand actually dropped. So the power generation dropped, and that could have crashed the grid, except demand dropped because a lot of people lost power because their power lines went down. It was really a terrible situation. On January 24th, there were 60 gigawatts of gas power on the grid, and then on January 25th, after the big snowstorm, that dropped down to 50 gigawatts. Coal dropped 26 gigawatts. Oil dropped 3 gigawatts. And, once again, the only reason we didn't lose power over the entire nation is because demand dropped because of all the blackouts. Wind and solar did not drop out. Wind and solar kept generating at the expected levels. And so part of what was going on, though, is that the gas demand exceeded the supply because people were trying to heat their houses because it was so cold. And so the natural gas electrical plants were competing with houses, you and me, with buildings for the same supply of natural gas that was in the pipelines. And so that's apparently why a lot of the natural gas plants went down. Coal plants, a lot of them went down just because coal plants are extremely fragile. They have tons of moving parts. They got conveyor belts. They got the piles of coal in really cold weather will actually freeze solid. So you can't get your chunks of coal to put onto the conveyor belt. So coal and natural gas went down, oil went down, but wind and solar kept on generating. And without the blackouts, we probably would have had nationwide crashes.
Oh, my.
All right. Well, that's actually all the news I had for the moment.
Actually,
Yes.
I had been looking at Fraser Crane and environmentalist stuff while you were talking.
Okay.
And, okay, first of all, apparently it sounds as if there actually is a bird called the Fraser Crane, but I can't confirm that because all the Google stuff is all about Fraser Crane. And
Okay.
also, at one point, he has a crane named after him as a publicity stunt in an episode, but it pecks him and dies.
Yeah, I saw that episode. Burned into my mind.
Yes.
So. Well, all right. That's it for this week.
And
Thank-
the Dallas Zoo actually named a crowned crane after Fraser Crane.
Oh, nice. All right. Well, thanks so much for listening. You know who we'll be rooting for during the Super Bowl. Hope you folks have a good time. We'll be back next week. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
We are signing off.
This time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was